Call the meeting to order. We're pleased today to have the Minister of Finance here. We will deal with the really two issues, the main estimates for 2017-2018 under Standing Order 81-4 and under Standing Order 108-2, a briefing on the budget 2017. And I believe members are aware that the Minister and Deputy Minister Paul Richon is here for the first hour on both these issues. Following that, we will turn to officials in the second hour of our meeting. So, Mr. Minister, I'm not sure if you have an opening statement or not, but we'll turn the floor over to you. Welcome. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do have an opening statement, and thank you, committee members, for having me here today. I'm very pleased to be here today to talk about Budget 2017, building a strong middle class, and how it will help Canadians. I want to begin by thanking the members of this committee for your hard work in putting together recommendations for Budget 2017. Your recommendations this year focused on the theme of what we can do to grow the Canadian economy, and they were informed by presentations from nearly 300 groups and individuals and more than 400 online submissions, ideas from Canadians from all walks of life from across our great country. Your work's vital to our budget process. You'll help us in making sure that we're doing our job in addressing the needs of Canadians. Notre deuxième budget représente une autre étape.
Second budget is another stage in the long-term plan of the government to create jobs and offer greater possibilities to middle class and those who are working hard to reach the middle class.
We promised Canadians to put middle class families first, and that's exactly what we've done. We started by asking the wealthiest 1% in our country to pay a little more so that we could cut taxes for the middle class. Then we introduced the new Canada Child Benefit. This tax-free benefit is simpler, more generous, and better targeted to help those who need it, rather than the previous child benefit system. We then reached an historic agreement with provinces to help people to retire with more dignity by strengthening the Canada Pension Plan. And we went even further to support Canadian families by investing $6 billion over 10 years for home care and $5 billion over 10 years to support mental health initiatives. To date, 12 provinces and territories have accepted the federal offer and received their share of this investment in home care and in mental health. In short, we took the necessary first steps to restore hope to the middle class. And we did that by putting people first. Et nous réalisons les types d'investissements qui permettent aux gens.
And we're making the types of investments that will enable people to make better use of their talents to ensure the sustainable growth of our economy. The measures that we have taken so far will have concrete and positive effects on our economy and on all Canadians.
Good reason. Forecasters are expecting Canada's economy to grow even faster in the next 2 years. In the last 8 months alone, the Canadian economy has created over 250,000 full-time jobs. We understand that despite these positive signs, people are still anxious about the future. The economy is changing. Global markets are shifting. Automation is on the rise. Canadians want to be assured that their hard work will pay off with a better future for their kids and for their grandkids. That's why Budget 2017 puts Canada's skilled, talented, and creative people at the heart of a more innovative future economy. Which is why we're not just creating the jobs of today, we're getting people ready for the jobs of tomorrow. Because the next job should be a better job. We call it our Innovation and Skills Plan. With it, we'll support a culture of lifelong learning to help workers adapt to the changing demands of our time. We recognize that we need to do more to help Canada's workers learn, adapt, and have good jobs throughout their working lives. Le budget de 2017 accroît de
The 2017 budget will be bringing about a significant increasing by $12.7 billion federal assistance for labour transfer agreements entered into with the provinces and territories.
More opportunities to upgrade their skills, gain experience, or get help to start their own business. For Canadians who've lost their job, we'll make it easier for EI claimants to pursue self-funded training while remaining eligible for their benefits. For Canadians going back to school for retraining, Budget 2017 will expand eligibility for Canada's student grants so that each year an additional 10,000 part-time students and a further 13,000 students with dependent children can get the financial help they need to pursue a post-secondary education. At the same time, we're taking action to give our young people the best possible start to their careers. Nous investissons pour promouvoir les sciences.
We are investing to promote science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, particularly among young women and Aboriginal women.
A basic skill that our children learn along with reading and writing. To help more young Canadians, including vulnerable youth, make the transition from school to work, get a strong start in their careers, we'll invest in the Youth Employment Strategy. This comprehensive set of skills and training measures will help Canadians at every stage of their career make Canada's greatest resource, our people, even greater. But Budget 2017 goes further. Notre plan ne cherche rien de moins que...
Our plan will be bringing about World Caliber Innovation Centre in Canada, with particular emphasis on the digital sector and agri-food.
2017 takes action to help ensure that Canada is positioned to take part in breakthroughs in fields like artificial intelligence. We believe Canada will be a world leader in artificial intelligence. That's why we're launching the Pan-Canadian Artificial Intelligence Strategy. This strategy will promote collaboration between Canada's main centres of expertise and position companies like Canada's new companies together with the new Vector Institute at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence research. Secondly, in agri-food, we're positioned for success. We know that by the year 2050, global demand for food is expected to double. Il s'agit là d'une excellente occasion pour nous.
This is an excellent opportunity for Canada. Our agri-food sector does already support $2 million and accounts for more than 6% of our GDP.
To crab and lobster and BC berries. It also means more jobs in the fields of southwestern Ontario and on the maple syrup farms of Quebec's eastern townships. Through Budget 2017, we'll help farmers, producers, and processors build their businesses globally and help all Canadians get the most out of the innovative economy. Through Budget 2017, the government is also taking action to make our neighbourhoods better, healthier places to live. Total federal investments in infrastructure now top $180 billion over 12 years. Ces fonds serviront en partie à améliorer l'accès.
These funds will be used in part to improve early childhood learning and daycare through an investment of $7 billion over 10 years to support and to create a greater number of places in daycare centres throughout the country, well, more particularly for families in the greatest need.
Their needs through the new National Housing Strategy, to which the government's committing more than $11.2 billion over 11 years to help build, renew and repair Canada's stock of affordable housing. And to support the next phase of ambitious public transit projects, the government will invest $20.1 billion over 11 years through bilateral agreements with provinces and territories. By investing in infrastructure now, we can strengthen and grow the middle class, create good, well-paying jobs, and make Canada an even better place to call home. Pendant que nous préparons les Canadiens pour l'économie de demain,
while we are preparing Canadians for tomorrow's economy and we are helping them to obtain the type of assistance they require today to succeed, our government also intends to continue its efforts to ensure that the tax system is a fair one.
The government will continue to improve tax fairness for Canadian families by closing loopholes, eliminating measures that disproportionately favor the wealthy, and cracking down on tax evasion so that every Canadian has a real and fair chance at success. Over the last 18 months, we've seen positive signs that our plan is working, but we can and will do more to help the middle class and those working hard to join it. As we remain focused on growth, it won't just be for growth's sake. Nous veillerons à ce que l'ensemble des Canadiens bénéficient.
We will ensure that all Canadians will be able to benefit from this growth, not only the most wealthiest.
And their grandkids. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We will go to 5-minute rounds, if we could get agreement on that, to try and get everybody on, starting with Mr. Fergus.
Monsieur le Président, bienvenue au
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to welcome the Minister to the committee. I have a few questions to put. First of all, I'd like to say that when we consider the two budgets that you presented, we have seen very positive consequences in relation to particular measures. One of the measures that is of concern to me and people in my constituency is the tax credit for public transit passes. As you know, Mr. Monod, I am almost a local member. My constituency is just on the other side of the river. I take the bus. I'm a regular user then of public transit. And since the previous government proposed this tax credit, I can say that I did not see an increase in the number of users of public transit. Can you explain to us, to the committee and Canadians in general, why you decided that you would do away with the tax credit for public transit passes? Thank you for your question. I think that it is an important issue. You probably know we did give an explanation saying that we consider that it's very important to consider how our tax system does function. And it is important for us to examine each measure to ensure that it is a fair one, that it is efficient, and that it does work as intended. We've considered a number of matters over the past year, and it is our view then that the measure that applied to public transit was at the outset aimed at increasing the ridership of people making use of our public transit system. And the purpose was also to create a positive impact on the environment. We are of the view then, having measured the impact, that this particular measure was not an efficient one, did not prove to be an efficient one. So we consider that it was more important to make investments in our public transit system throughout the country in order to increase the number of people who are making use of it. And will bring about a positive effect on the environment. And this is why we decided that we would be making investments in our public transit system in the future of over more than $20 billion. We'll be working with the municipalities and provinces to come up with projects that where we will see the necessary impact. This is our aim. We'll be continuing our study of this measure and possible measures to ensure that they are effective. And with this decision, we've found another way of achieving our objective and having a greater impact on Canadians. Thank you. There's a second initiative, Minister, relating to the Canadian Child Benefit, the Canada Child Benefit. I was visiting various parts of my constituency, and I met an old friend of mine who works as a volunteer with the St. Vincent de Paul Society. I think that a number of my colleagues are aware of the good work that is done by this particular group, St. Vincent de Paul. And they do have a campaign to provide assistance to poor families with children. An interesting thing this year, on this particular weekend, my friend told me that it was quite strange. They noted that there was a drop in the number of applications from families this particular year, from these low-income families, to obtain assistance for helping with their children. And she said that this was the direct result of the Canada Child Benefit. I'd like to know whether your department has noted that there has been a difference throughout Canada as a result of this Canada Child Benefit in the actual lives of people who are in need. Thank you. Yes, we have heard stories like this from throughout the country. We know that there has been a great change for Canadian families because of the Canada Child Benefit. We know that the poverty level for children is approximately 40% lower this year than in 2014. This is an important achievement. I think that figures are quite impressive. 300,000 children will find themselves in a better situation this year. 300,000 children then who will not be living in poverty. This is a very significant change. We'll continue to keep watch to see what the effect of this is on Canadian families, but we are sure that this has resulted in a significant difference, and that is why at the present time we do have a plan to come up with a way of providing more employment for families in the future, because in view of their improved situation, families can consider what will be possible for the future and how they can improve their situation in the future. We've already done something then to help the situation of certain families. We'll continue our efforts, and one of the important things is to provide greater employment opportunities in the future.
A little longer than 5 to keep it balanced. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair. Mes chers collègues, c'est toujours agréable de vous voir. Monsieur le ministre, très agréable de vous voir.
Mr. Minister, very happy to see you. And I'd like to point out that I do appreciate the quality of the French, the Minister of Finance, who speaks very correctly. And even though he may, for example, he made a little joke, sometimes it's when I put questions, sometimes I do make a joke because I'm not always getting the answer that I expect. Let's get down to brass tacks here. Our government is our party is certainly concerned about the approach that is the decision to take, that has been taken to borrow, and we don't know what the effect this will be. As I said previously, there is not a family that would be able to live on a credit line of credit, and there is a time when you have to pay. So my question for the minister is a very simple one. I'd like to know what is the date for return to a balanced budget in Canada? Thank you. I think that it is important to explain what we hope to do, what we wish to do for the economy. The greatest challenge we are facing at the present time is because of the world economy and because of certain demographic changes. It is to the growth in the economy. I think it was very clear when we began our mandate. We knew the reasons for the difficult figures was because of our level of economic growth. And that is why we decided that the most important thing for us and for Canadian families throughout the country was to make investments. At the beginning, we would be making investments in families, and we would also be investing in the future of our country. That is why we started with measures that would improve the situation of families, that would improve their level of optimism. And the effects of this have been quite encouraging because we have a lower unemployment rate than before. And secondly, investments in the future. An optimistic country must make investments to improve the situation in the future. And this is something that we can do in the present situation. With a balance sheet that is among the best in the G7, we are in a position to make significant investments, and we are able to improve the situation in the future. Fortunately, we are already starting to see the results. We find ourselves with an excellent situation for many families in the country, and our vision for the future when it comes to economic growth is more positive than it was previously. Mr. Chair, I think that what is quite clear, I think that it was when the Liberal Party started its mandate, it was elected on the basis of a promise of return to a balanced budget. I think that all the Canadians who listen to us, who are listening to us, I asked for a specific date when we could expect a return to a balanced budget. The minister has given all sorts of explanations, but is not giving us a precise date. I could put this question 25 times, as I did previously 16 times, without getting an answer. If we are unable to have a date, Mr. Chair, I'd like to put the question to the minister. Does Canada intend to return to a balanced budget in the short term, the medium term, or long term?
I'd like to be very clear in this. We are in the situation that we are in right now. The reason that the deficit was higher than we expected when we came into office was because of the low growth. So fully half of the deficit that we delivered on our first budget was because the growth was lower than was expected. So as we think about that situation, we deal with the actual problem. So by dealing with the actual problem, what we're doing is we are actually increasing the growth rate of this country. Our starting point was to make sure that Canadians felt optimistic about the future. The good news is with a much lower level of unemployment now, with the best growth in new jobs that we've seen in over a decade, that we now have a sense of optimism. The other good news is that we're now starting to see more positive growth rates. That is exactly what we need to do to deal with getting great jobs for Canadians, having a more optimistic future, and over the long term ensuring we can continue to reduce the amount of net debt against our GDP, which we know is the most important measure as we think about our fiscal capacity.
Mr. Speaker, this is a brand new political and economic policy. Canadians feel optimistic. Is that the way to run the country? Not really. So this is why we are very concerned. The minister can answer a quiet question, a simple question, when Canada will get back, and can give an agenda, an horizon of when Canada will get back, long term, medium term, or short term. The minister can answer. We are very concerned.
We completely disagree with the member. Let me say that unemployment statistics are not just statistics. So when we say that we've created 276,000 new jobs over the last 12 months, 81% of them full-time, those are not just statistics. Those are families that have jobs. So every one of those families that has a full-time job is feeling more optimistic. Every one of those families that's feeling more optimistic is more likely to put their kids in piano lessons or put their kids in hockey camp or do the things that they want to do for their family. That is what's helping our economy to be successful. As we look towards what we can invest in the future, it's about having optimistic families that are making investments in the future, investments in their children, investments in themselves, so they can improve their own skills and make all of us wealthier because the economy will be more successful. So that is exactly what we're trying to achieve. And the good news is, the good news for all of us, even those of us who don't agree with our plan, the good news is it's working. So it's going to be better for you too.
Thank you both. Mr. Dussault. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for coming here to the committee today. I'm sure that you consider the platform and the promises of the Liberal Party as important as part of the work that you are doing, and Minister of Finance, and that is important for you to respect these promises. I'd like to perhaps emphasize something that is missing in the budget, and something that you did support in an NDP motion. Quite recently, on the 8th of March, you supported a motion calling for the closing of purchase of shares as a tax loophole. You said that you'll be examining tax expenses in the past year, and you've identified a number of places where there are certain corrections that should be made, certain corrections to the Income Tax Act. In the budget in 2017, after supporting the NDP, why did you not decide to close down this loophole that allows we did consider the these dispenses with respect to shares options, and we did give particular consideration to certain standards used by private corporations that make it possible for individuals to have a better tax situation. This is something that we consider to be important. And we thought that this was a way of ensuring that we have a fairer system that is taking a close look and determining how we can be sure that people are not making use of certain type of aggressive tax planning that results in them having a better situation than their neighbors. We consider that this is important. And we think that it is possible to change the system then to ensure that people are not able to have a lower tax level than their neighbors. And this is what we consider to be the most important thing. It is possible to achieve this, and that is why we decided that we would have a consultation. And after this consultation, we would be making certain changes that will ensure that we do have a fairer system. We consider that, so you do not plan to implement this Liberal promise within the short term. You are refusing, in other words, quite categorically to close down this loophole with respect to stock options. We will continue to examine how we can have an effective system, a system that is fair, but we want to be quite clear. It is important for us to be sure that people are paying their fair share. This is what was in our budget for 2016. There are people that will be $4 million devoted to putting an end to tax evasion, to be sure that people will be paying their fair share. And we will be continuing this study to determine how we can have a fair system.
And that is something we'll do throughout our mandate. Thank you. On another topic, recently we learned that Canadian banks were engaging in suspicious, sometimes even illegal activities. I don't know if you heard about those revelations made by CBC Radio-Canada. Some bank employees said that they were under pressure to sell financial products, and by engaging in behavior which was not right. What do you think of these practices that were engaged in by the banks, and what are you going to do to make sure that banks respect the law?
We believe it's very important that that the banking system is treating its customers appropriately. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada and the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions are looking into banking practices. We are going to make sure that they have the resources to do so. We're staying very close to make sure that they are in fact reviewing those banking practices. We think that, that this is important for us to consider and to assure that people are not being pushed into products that are inappropriate for the situation. So we take it seriously, and I'm encouraged that the Financial Consumer Agency and OSFI have moved forward as quickly as they have, and as I said, we will remain focused on this issue.
Pierre, we went a little over an hour. Ms. O'Connell, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. I want to touch on something that was a highlight of this budget that we haven't seen before, and that is the gender lens that was put on it. And so my question is in around, during this process, were there any surprises that maybe affected policy since taking a different approach with this budget? And or what does this mean in the future, policy-wise, when making decisions for the budget that now determines what it means for different people in this country?
Thank you. We are very pleased with the first step in doing a gender analysis in our budget. I want to step back and set the framework for this. Women are more than 50% of our population, and we have a lower workforce participation among women than we have among men, especially in the 25 to 54 age group. We continue to have a pay for women that is lower than for men in similar jobs with similar experience. So we know that as a country, we're not making the best use of an incredibly important part of our population. That's the backdrop for our decision to move forward in this regard. We want to make sure that we're empowering women to get into the workforce and to have the success that they should have once they're there. So that's the frame of reference in coming forward and saying that we should look at our budget with an analysis of how it impacts women. We made significant progress on this year, but we're not by any stretch of the imagination finished. It's an area where not every department could look at every measure and analyze it to the extent that we'd like to do that. We're still building expertise. You can expect that this will be a continued analysis over the course of future budgets. So I expect that we will find that there are some ideas that we have that might look through that lens not be appropriate, or that we might be able to do more of in order to have a bigger impact. Some of the things that very clearly are going to have an impact this year, one is the $7 billion that we've put in over a decade for early learning and childcare. We know that one of the obstacles to women being successful in the workforce is childcare, so we know that will have an impact. The second is we looked at the amount of women accessing venture capital funds. We've had a great deal of success with venture capital funds over the past decade, the VCAP program, and found that there were not as many women entrepreneurs accessing those funds as men, and for that reason dealt with that issue by making a specific measure in that regard. We'll continue to do this, and it's important for us to do this not only because we want to empower women to be more successful, but for all Canadians, because if we can increase workforce participation, get a higher level of success for women, we'll deal with one of our most fundamental challenges, and that's demographic change. And this is the biggest way we can do that. Thank you. And I'm glad that this will continue. I filled in for Committee HUMA once, and they're looking at the maternity leave and our EI system alone, although I don't think it was designed maliciously to impact women negatively. But if you look at, for example, I have a resident in my community who was laid off right after her maternity leave, but EI is calculated based on the last, I think, 52 weeks that you worked. So, she's left out, but her male colleagues who were also laid off could access the EI system. So that lens right there is just such a kind of simple issue that, I don't think it was ever designed for, but so adding this lens is going to look at the differences that face women and men in the workforce. And just following up on that, Mr. Chair, in terms of infrastructure, you touched on housing as well as transit. I just want to say two quick things and get your thoughts and comments, but in terms of transit,
one of the things I was very pleased to see, and when I spoke to my municipal colleagues after the budget was announced, the transit funding, the predictable funding that's now based on ridership and population, and the importance of that so that you can actually increase transit routes or fleet and all of that, that just basing it on ridership doesn't actually get you further ahead. It somewhat maintains what you have. So I don't know if you have a comment on that. And then lastly, in terms of affordable housing and the economic benefit, it's not just the right thing to do, but what that means actually for the economy and getting more people in the workforce or ensuring that people can really reach their full potential. Thank you.
Well, quickly, the notion that we are going to work together with provinces and municipalities on public transit and deal with that based on ridership and population has been one that has been, from my perspective, going across the country, has met with a great deal of success. And clearly, our initiative around affordable housing is to deal with the very real challenge that we have when people cannot find adequate lodging. And also to improve the current housing stock. So this will make an important long-term difference as we move forward on the funding together with provinces and municipalities.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Mr. Albas, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Minister. Thank you for coming here today. Certainly appreciate your work on behalf of our great country. I'd just like to start off with, obviously, provinces are in a much different state. Obviously, you've tabled your second budget. Other provincial finance ministers, such as Finance Minister CC in Alberta, has tabled theirs. Also deficits, large deficits, no sign of returning back to balanced budgets. In fact, it's been kicked down further. He's received questions on whether or not the rating agencies are going to continue the AAA credit rating. Given that you continue to say that it's in the country's interest to go into large deficits without any sign of when we will return in short, middle, or long term, have you spoken to any of the credit agencies? Have they questioned you on the fiscal plan and whether or not Canada will still retain its AAA credit rating?
Thank you. Well, let me start by saying that as we make investments in the future of our country, as we work to create good jobs for Canadians, we are absolutely focused on doing that in a responsible way. We have made a commitment to be fiscally responsible, and we know that we've followed through on that commitment by showing a track to continued net debt to GDP situation that is positive. That will continue to be our focus. We believe that the AAA credit rating that we have is one that is both because of our very strong fiscal situation, because we have the best balance sheet in the G7 countries. That's positive because when you look at our approach to making investments, you find that we are in consideration of other countries that are in a similar situation, making fiscal investments that are actually having an outcome that's positive. So it is an approach that we know is consistent with fiscal responsibility. We do continue to look at what the rating agencies say about Canada. I most recently met with Moody's in New York last week. They had a positive response, in my estimation. You can find it online to our budget, and the meeting, I will tell you, was positive. Their sense, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, you can read their report, was that we were making investments that were both having an impact and were fiscally responsible.
Yeah, well, thank you for explaining your meeting. Now, one reason why I ask about that is because if we do not retain our AAA credit rating, then obviously we're going to see our debt servicing costs go up. And most Canadians would be shocked to hear that we spend more on debt servicing right now than we do on things like national defense. So I think this will become an important issue, particularly when we see down south, we see interest rates going up. I don't see the same kind of fiscal, or say monetary policy here in Canada, which means at some point our debt may go up whether or not we retain that AAA credit rating, are you anticipating further increases to our debt loads?
Let me come back to the approach that we're taking is one that we believe is appropriate for our current situation. It's having a positive impact.
Do you see, Minister, though, that there could be, again, cost increases on the debt side? You're financing a lot of your activities, and whether or not I agree with them or not is not the question. The question was, as far as do you see our interest rates, the interest rates of the United States having an impact on our debt? We are borrowing money, and obviously to be competitive, we will have to raise that at some point. Do you see that as an issue?
You know, I'm not going to opine on Canada's interest rate. That's the domain of the
I'm asking
central bank
about
governor.
our debt rates, though. Yeah.
Dan?
Well, I've asked about our debt. That's completely under his jurisdiction.
Let's hear what the minister have to say, and then we'll go from there.
What have you asked about our debt?
I've asked you, sir, that if we see interest rates rising in the United States, that will put pressure on Canada in order to be able to attract people that will purchase our debt to finance the investments, and I use that with air quotes on purpose. Sir, that has a direct relation to your ministry.
Well, perhaps I can address your question a couple of ways. We have a positive credit rating from all of the major credit rating agencies. We have a plan that includes making investments for the long term. That does require that we raise debt. We have had no challenges in raising that debt, and
I'll make it short.
Since we are making responsible decisions that are resulting in positive outcomes for our economy, my expectation is that that improving economy will put us in a continuing positive situation.
Okay, lastly, Minister, and very briefly, obviously capital gains, there's a lot of uncertainty around that, particularly after the budget, which had no changes in it. You again said to the press that it's still on the table. Obviously, we have the lowest rates of investment in this country since 1981 for business investment. That has a correlation, obviously, to wages and to jobs. You know, are you willing to say at some point, so we can build that certainty on the question of capital gains?
Sorry, what is the question?
The question is, are you going to continue to create uncertainty by not answering on capital gains, or are you going to say to people, we're taking any increase on capital gains off the table in order to attract investment to this country?
Am I missing something? There was no change in capital gains in the budget.
But you, again, through your statements through the press, Minister, have said you're continue to examine it. So are you going to continue to just create that uncertainty, or are you going to say that that is off the table?
That's it, Dan.
What I would like to say to this room, as I would say to any other room, is that was not in our budget. And I will not speculate on taxes. It's inappropriate for a finance minister to speculate on what may or may not be done in the future. You can read in our budget what we decided to do, and it's there in black and white.
Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Finance Minister. We have been seeing a lot of green shoots, if I can use that term, in the Canadian economy. Today we had housing starts come out, and we hit a 10-year high with strong housing activity out west in BC and Alberta per se, in multi-units. We've been seeing a lot of good data come out, which I think is a reflection of the plan that we put in place and that we ran on. The budget, which I've kind of coined as the Skills, Innovation and Infrastructure budget, takes us the right way, in the right direction, in a fiscally responsible manner. But there is something that you spoke about in the beginning, and I think it needs to be, I would like to hear an elaboration on, is the importance on lifelong learning, especially with the economy we face, changing technology, and so forth. And I was wondering if you can elaborate on lifelong learning and the importance to Canadians and what measures we've put in place in the budget. Thank you.
Well, I think you characterized the budget well from our perspective. We believe that it's important that we think about not only where Canada can be economically successful, in terms of the sectors where we already are successful and places where we should make investments, but also ensure that Canadians can be successful in those places. So lifelong learning is critically important to helping people to be resilient in the face of economic opportunities and challenges. We talked about a number of measures in our budget that are going to be helpful for people at all stages of life, starting with thinking about how we can help children getting coding skills at a very early stage in their life. Thinking about how we can make investments in MyTechs to help people to have more cooperative education as they're going through their university years. Then thinking about how we can ensure that people get the right information about what sectors of the economy they should maybe focus their studies in and their training in, by thinking about creating an agency that will give people better information from both from business and from the government about where jobs of the future will be and how they can get access to training. And finally, putting significantly more training funds that we can work together with the provinces to help people to get the kinds of skills that they need. So this is very much what we're trying to achieve with this budget. We know that we'll need to work together with the provinces to get there, but we are looking forward to making that sort of impact on Canadians.
Yeah. And I would, one of the ways to grow our economy is to invest in human capital, you can use that term again, and focusing on lifelong learning is one of those avenues. I would like to say, I know my prior colleague from across the side talked about the rating agencies, and I couldn't help but note, spending 4.5 years at one of the big three rating agencies, that I look upon when I speak from my personal side, I look at the fiscal responsibility and obviously as paramount important for any government, but the fiscal responsibility that's built into our plan, this budget that I read. I applaud you in keeping us on a steady ship and net debt to GDP ratio steady or declining. So if you'd like to comment on the importance of that, that'd be great.
Well, just to restate what I've said here today is that we recognize that we need to have a balance in all things, that while we make investments in making sure that our economy is growing at the pace that we hope to have it grow, while we're making investments in jobs, while we're ensuring that the most vulnerable in our society are given opportunities, we need to also think about our fiscal responsibility and ensuring that we are in a continuing positive situation. We believe we found that balance. We think that managing our net debt to GDP over time is critically important. It will allow us to maintain our privileged position as the best country in the G7 countries from the standpoint of our balance sheet, and that'll be a commitment that we will maintain moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leiper.
Minister, I know that you spent a lot of time since the budget in Southern Ontario, a number of announcements, a number of awarding of grants. I spent the week after the budget in my home province of Alberta, and optimism is not one of the words that I would use to describe the feeling of Albertans. In fact, many Albertans that I spoke to are downright angry about the fact that there's a lot more. Alberta still sends way more money east to Ottawa than comes back in the way of transfer payments. What they said to me was, we got a paltry $30 million. At the same time, 10 times that money went to Bombardier. How would you respond to those Albertans?
In the first instance, what I can say to you is the very first place I touched down after the budget week was in Calgary to meet with people in Calgary. Had the opportunity to meet with the mayor there to talk about things that we can do to work together in the city of Calgary around public transit as a good example. Had the opportunity as well to speak to the Calgary Chamber of Commerce and hear from business people in Calgary. I also did spend time, as you said, in Southern Ontario as well. I was in London, Ontario, where I met with students at Western University. And what I can tell you in both places was that there is an improvement in terms of employment. I will say that in Alberta, it's not as fast an improvement as any of us would like, but there has been an improvement in terms of jobs in Alberta. We are working together to think about how we can continue on that trajectory. We know that the resource shock is continuing to be a challenge for investors in that province. But we do also see that with our focus on the resource sector and the clean technology sector as two places where we know Canada can make an enormous difference over the long term, that will have a positive impact on people in Alberta today and certainly create job opportunities for people tomorrow.
Okay. I'd like to ask a couple more questions if I could. Albertans also said to me that they hear a lot about infrastructure spending and asked if I could name one single project that is underway in Alberta as a result of last year's budget. I couldn't. Can you help me out?
I would be happy to have our department send you details.
But you can't name anything that's happening because of the infrastructure budget. So I don't think there is anything happening in Alberta.
Well, that's entirely inappropriate. I can tell you that 1,300 projects have been agreed to be starting in this country. That $6 billion worth of projects are underway.
And most of that was from the previous Conservative government money that was left over. I'm talking about your last year's budget.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'll take your point of order in a sec. I think the minister has agreed that the department will provide us information on some of those infrastructure projects that are taking
I'll be
place
happy
in
to
Alberta.
receive that.
Your point of order, Madam O'Connell.
Point of order is that isn't it the rules of this committee that the witness has the same amount of time generally as the questioner? So I think we should allow the minister to finish instead of just being interrupted and not having a chance.
My first question, Mr. Chair, was very brief and the answer was very lengthy.
Okay,
I only have a few more minutes left.
We're relatively balanced here. Mr. Leipert, go ahead. You have one more question.
I wanted to ask you about the decision to remove the ability of the farming community to spread income and losses over several years. That really works out to be a tax increase for farmers. Why was that decision made?
Can you provide more details on the question, please?
Well, it's my understanding that previous to this budget, there was the ability of the farming community, if they had a good particular crop year and then the next year they didn't have, or vice versa, they had the ability to spread income and loss over several years. That was removed in this budget.
I think Mr. Minister and Mr. Leipert, what you're referring to, Ron, is the consultations on cash tickets for grain. I think that's what the question relates to. I don't believe it's in this budget. I think consultations have been announced.
I'm going to let Andrew Marsland respond to that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the question relates, as the Chair notes, to an item in the budget on cash purchase tickets, which is a measure relating to deliveries of grain to licensed elevators. And what the budget announced was a consultation on the continued utility of that measure coming out of the review of tax expenditures. So it's seeking people's views on that measure and its continued utility.
Okay, well, that was reported wrongly then, Mr. Chair.
I think just so we're all clear, and what I'm fairly familiar with this issue, farmers cannot always determine when they sell their product, and they could in fact sell 2 years of crop in one, and very little income in 1 year and a high income in the other, and not as many expenditures to weigh against it. So it is the system they work under, but what we're talking about here is no decision has been made, but there is a consultation going to take place. That's correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. That's then Mr. Falconer-Ouellette and Mr. Dussault and Mr. Greywald. So we'll go about 5 minutes over if we could, Mr. Minister. Mr. Falconer-Ouellette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Minister of Finance. Bill, I really appreciate you coming here. In a previous period of this parliamentary session, I spoke on the right to die legislation that we had eventually passed as the government. And in Budget 2017, there is an allocation towards home care and health. And I was just wondering how much do you expect that will be put towards palliative care, which is a very important subject. I know there's still negotiations which are going on, but I was wondering if you could just discuss that a bit.
Thanks for the question. We've identified in both in our discussions with the provinces and in our agreements with the provinces around healthcare, the importance of making investments in home care, the importance of making investments in palliative care, the importance of making investments in mental health care. We, of course, are not the level of government that delivers on those specific investments, so that will be a conclusion that can only be reached in consultation with the provinces, and in fact is for them to deliver. So I can't actually answer that question. That's one that will be discussed between the Minister of Health and her colleagues at the provincial and territorial health level.
Thank you very much. So it's still ongoing. That's good. I was also wondering, we've also discussed in the past when you've come here, issues surrounding the Canada Child Benefit. And you know, it's a great program. I'm very supportive of it. But we talked often about those families in social assistance and children who were in the care of the state, child welfare. And I've also advocated that children who are in the welfare system should receive this benefit. It shouldn't be taken or clawed back by a province. And I've learned recently, you know, I've talked about this as well privately, but with trying to make sure that the province doesn't do it. But apparently the province of Manitoba is still clawing this fund back from these kids. Many provinces will take these funds for child welfare children and place it in a trust so that when they age out of the system, our most vulnerable citizens will have the ability then to have perhaps a form of, you know, something they can use to become successful. And I was kind of hoping to get your support to talk to Manitoba to make sure that they don't actually claw this back anymore, because I think it perhaps might contravene federal legislation, but it certainly contravenes our moral values about who our most vulnerable citizens are.
Why don't I respond very quickly? We have a program called the Children's Special Allowance. It's precisely to deal with the issue of children in care. And through that program, we provide provinces funding to provide exactly the same benefit that other children will receive through the Canada Child Benefit. And we're happy to follow up with on any issues related to that with the appropriate province.
Well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate that because it's very important to people in Manitoba. We have 11,000 children in care, and that's a large population that certainly needs our support here at the federal level in any way we can. I guess my final comment and question is, I was very pleased with the budget. I spoke in the House on it concerning Indigenous peoples, on the investments, 27% increase in investments over the lifetime of our government. It's actually a very incredible, even Aboriginal languages. I was just wondering if you could discuss that and talk about, you know, why you decided to go down that route and why it's important.
Well, you know, thank you for that opportunity to comment on what is a continuing area of focus for our government. We believe that we need to be working to have a much better situation for Indigenous people in this country. We know that through nation-to-nation dialogue, we can improve the situation, but we know that it can really only be fully improved if we actually put the funding required to make a difference over the long term. So in thinking about the places where we've made funding, in thinking about education, thinking about infrastructure, and in the course of this year's budget, the biggest single issue in thinking about how we can make sure that we deliver health care to Indigenous peoples on reserve. We know that all these things are critically important if we really do want to have a better situation for what, after all, is a critically important part of our country. It also is critically important that we have higher graduation rates for Indigenous peoples and better workforce attachment, and we can only do it with the kind of investment that will have those outcomes as possibilities. So that's what we're committed to doing. It's a long-term discussion, and we're going to remain focused in this area.
Thank you both. Mr. Dussault, time for one question, and we'll bounce back to Mr. Greywall for the final one.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je vais poser une question sur un sujet.
Thank you very much. I have a question on a complex issue, the Income Tax Act. You said, and the Prime Minister said, and your parliamentary secretary said repeatedly that the Income Tax Act was too complex and that it had to be streamlined so Canadians could understand it. And that's not the case today. It's one of the most complex pieces of legislation we have, and the average Canadian couldn't understand it. Yet no one is allowed or can ignore the law. We all have to pay taxes, so we should be able to understand our legislation. So you said our tax legislation is too complex, so you'll be in power almost 2 years soon. So how far are you along in the review of the Income Tax Act, or the Tax Act, and when are we going to have a full review of the Act? When will it be streamlined so it's easy enough to understand for all Canadians? Oh, that's a very important objective for us. We began with a couple of measures this year with the credit. That's a first step, but there's more to do. However, we need to find ways to ensure that our system is fair and that it works well for everyone.
That is why, as I said, we did decide that we would be setting aside more than $500 million this year for the Canadian Tax Agency, and at the same time I'm working with my international counterparts in the G7 to ensure that our systems will enable us to have people paying income tax in the jurisdiction where it is necessary. There are a number of initiatives that we are carrying out at the same time. There is simplification, yes. And finding those people who are making use of tax avoidance to avoid paying their share, and to find a way of having a fair system for Canadians as a whole.
For being here. I'm the son of a taxi cab driver, so on behalf of the taxi community, thank you so much on the Tax Fairness Initiative, on changing the definition of a taxi business to include ride-sharing to have to pay HST and GST. Although my question is not on that, but I thought I'd say thank you as well. My question is on coding. So I get an opportunity to speak at a lot of high schools, and a lot of kids are worried about going on to post-secondary education and then the jobs that will be out there tomorrow, because the landscape is changing so rapidly. And our government's made this investment in coding. Can you speak to the benefits that we hope to realize as a nation by ensuring that kids as young as kindergarten are learning to code?
Well, thank you. I mean, can I take the opportunity to say that the decision around taxis was purely one of ensuring that that if people are choosing between two cars sitting there, that they both pay the same level of tax. It just seems appropriate. We recognize that coding for young people, or developing the skills required for tomorrow for people in multiple sectors of our economy, is going to be increasingly important in what will continue to be a fast-changing economy. We know that the kind of dynamism that an economy displays presents challenges, but also presents exciting opportunities. You can only realize those opportunities if you have the base set of skills and the opportunity for training that will allow you to be successful. That's the reason why we want to start by making sure people have the base set of skills early on. It's the reason why, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that the kind of education approach that we have during people's educational years allows them to get work while they're doing their education. It's the reason why we want to make sure that we have an approach to lifelong learning, which gives people the understanding of where they should make their personal investments, and then creates an actual approach to giving them the capacity to do that through our agreements with the provinces on training. So it's going to continue to be a challenge as the economy changes rapidly, and we want to prepare Canadians for that challenge and turn it into opportunities for people with exciting jobs.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you both. Just to close off, Minister, I do have I don't know if it's a question or more a comment. We've had Dominic Barton and some other representatives from the Advisory Committee on Economic Growth before the committee, and we really appreciate their work, not expecting that that the government will agree with everything they recommend for sure, but as one who comes out of the farming sector, I can tell you that the farming sector are very pleased about their emphasis on the potential in the agri-food industry. My concern, however, is yes, that potential is there, but in a whole of government, and this is not a criticism of finance, but in the whole of government, when approach is taken to gain economic growth in one area, another department can kind of hamper that economic growth by new regulations or more paperwork or whatever. And I'll give you an example, and the reason this comes to mind is because an individual emailed me last night. Now, this is a fairly small farming family, 4 sons, mom and dad. And on the good agriculture practices, which makes a whole lot of sense. We want to ensure our food is safe. But this is what he said. When GAP, meaning Good Agriculture Practice, started, Willie, which is his wife, and I did it ourselves for years. Then they started demanding more and more, so I just said to my sons, if you want to farm, you have to do this yourself. I just could not do it anymore. Now my son can't do it alone, so he had to hire someone to help him. It is costing us a fortune. The end result is that we know we can't keep up with all these new rules, and the reality is there's a different reality on the farm, and farmers do a pretty darn good job of providing safe food. But the reality, whether it's the Canadian Food Inspection Agency or Revenue Canada or any other agency in this town, is they don't realize the cost and the time that it takes for people on the farm to do paperwork. They're farmers. Yes, you can hire accountants, that costs money, or others to fill it. I can give you another example. To fill out an application for an environmental protection where you maybe get $25,000, it will take a volunteer 30 hours to fill out that one application, 28 pages. It just makes no sense. It's for 20. Why can't we simplify stuff to keep it down to a page or something like that? And so it's not a criticism of you, but it's a whole of government thing that we somehow have to create efficiencies on some of these rules that's not taking away from the ability of a farmer or a recreational stream group or whatever to do their job. And you know, it sits on a desk here in Ottawa for a week or two. I often say this Ottawa's a bubble without reality, and I really firmly believe that. Anyway, my point is, I guess, I think the Cabinet, yourself as Minister, in terms of these good proposals that you may have to attain economic growth, we have to ensure that on the other side of the equation, we're not another department, another agency from the federal or provincial government is not hampering the ability to achieve that economic growth that you, through your programming, are trying to attain. That's my point. Okay. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Minister and Deputy, for your appearance. We will suspend for a few minutes and then come back with officials. Meeting suspended. reconvene and welcome to the table departmental officials, Mr. Mars, Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Jovanovic, General Director, Mr. Purvis, General Director, Federal Provincial Social Policy Branch, and Mr. Recker, Fiscal Policy Division, Economic and Fiscal Policy Branch. Welcome, and I believe Mr. Mars, you have a brief statement, and then we'll go to see who has questions. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. En tant que...
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. As the Chief Financial Officer, I am the person responsible for establishing the financial reports for the main estimates of 2017-2018 for the Department of Finance. I'm accompanied today by officials from the Department of Finance that will be giving a more in-depth presentation on policies and figures included in this document. The main estimates for 2017-2018 has identified a number of total budget requirements of $90.1 billion. That is the statutory expenditures and 89.3 in other expenditures. These legislative items are to be found, statutory items are to be found in the document for information purposes, are not part of appropriation.
$90.1 billion is $679.8 million higher compared to the 2016-17 main estimates of $89.5 billion, and is due to an increase of $681.3 million in statutory items, offset by a $1.5 million decrease in voted amounts. Within the statutory forecast, the major contributing factors to the $681.3 million increase are as follows. A $1.1 billion increase in the Canada Health Transfer, reflecting the minimum 3% legislated growth rate for 2017-18. A $400.4 million increase in the Canada Social Transfer, reflecting the 3% legislated annual increase. A $373.2 million increase in fiscal equalization to reflect the 2.09% gross domestic product-based escalator being applied to the 2016-17 level. A $145.5 million increase in territorial financing as a result of new and updated data used to calculate territorial expenditure requirements and revenue capacities entering the formula. A $528 million decrease in other interest costs due to a decrease in the average Government of Canada long-term bond rate, which is used to calculate interest on the public sector pension obligations pertaining to service pre-April 1st, 2000, and a $764 million decrease in interest on unmatured debt to reflect private sector economists' expectations from the 2016 fall economic statement projections. The decrease of $1.5 million in Vote 1 program expenditures is mainly due to a decrease in funding for time-limited Budget 2015 initiatives totaling $1 million, and Budget 2016 reductions to professional services, advertising, and travel totaling $0.5 million. This concludes my overview of the main estimates. I'd be pleased to address any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mars. And people or members have that document before them on the points that Mr. Mars outlined in part 2 of the main estimates. So thank you, Mr. Mars. Starting with Mr. Ouellette, we'll try and hold it to limited 5-minute rounds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I very much appreciate you coming here to speak on such a wide-ranging topic. I'm sure it must be very difficult to be prepared for every eventuality or any different type of question. So I'm going to start with one that was suggested. Accordingly, the Department of Finance Departmental Plan 2017-18 mentions that cybersecurity incidents and failures in supporting systems have been identified as risks that could cause serious disruptions and affect the department's ability to execute critical government operations. And so I guess my question is, what amounts, if any, are being requested to address cybersecurity risks within the department, and what policies or measures has the department implemented in order to address cybersecurity incidents or failures in supporting systems?
The department takes cybersecurity very seriously. There are or there are a number of existing functions within the department that are dedicated to maintaining the security of the department from an IT perspective. So with respect to information technology services more specifically, there are 26 full-time equivalent employees working in that particular area, and they deliver information technology services within the department. And within that envelope, totaling about $2.5 million in salary, are the individuals that would be dedicated to, among other things, maintaining the security of the department and the security of the department's information.
We've also heard quite a bit in the news about surveillance in the local areas around Parliament Hill. I was just, do you believe your information you can guarantee it's 100% secure?
Well, so speaking as an accountant of the department, it's not exactly my specialty. I do know, though, that there are a number of qualified individuals working within the Information Technology Group, both within the department, also within Shared Services Canada and other security-based agencies that are committed to the security of the department's information. So beyond that, I wouldn't be qualified individually to speak to the security of information technology within the department.
I also would like to talk about domestic coinage, so the Royal Canadian Mint. So we had a change in the Royal Canadian Mint Act. It increased about $8 million in the overall cost because they couldn't anticipate profits. I was wondering if there's a possibility of moving towards a $5 coin at some point, or a $10 coin, in order to reduce costs for the Royal Canadian Mint. Obviously, it's not a priority of our government to be subsidizing or giving more funds to the Royal Canadian Mint, but is there a way that the Royal Canadian Mint can save more money?
Well, I think I'm not aware of any specific deliberations with respect to other denominations of coins. What I can say is that there is historical precedent with respect to removing coins from circulation, such as in the case of the penny, which was designed to reduce costs with respect to penny production. So the comments you made earlier with respect to the $8 million increase in domestic coinage costs for 27-18 is more a reflection of adjustments to the Royal Canadian Mint Act that put back into place certain provisions that would ensure that the mint itself could generate enough profit to sustain operations.
Okay, thank you very much. And I was just wanted to talk very quickly about the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. Sorry to jump around again. But
I believe somebody from the financial institutions is here if they want to come to the table as well. You're welcome. If a question is asked that's related to your area expertise, just pull up a chair. Go ahead, Robert. Sorry. Ms. Bridges.
So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the estimates, what your office does, and why you're requesting, obviously, additional funds.
Michelle Bridges is Managing Director, Finance and Corporate Planning. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your question. So the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions is responsible for regulating and supervising deposit-taking institutions, insurance companies, both life insurance and property and casualty insurance companies, as well as private pension plans that are in the federal jurisdiction. So basically, organizations that span multiple provinces, such as the airlines or the rail companies, as well as First Nations plans. Our main estimates has basically a statutory voting component as well as a parliamentary appropriation. The parliamentary appropriation is a flat amount across the main estimate planning horizon, and that money is utilized by the Office of the Chief Actuary, which provides services both for actuarial valuation as well as advisory services to a number of benefits plans and pension plans across the federal government. It's also used for non-statutory purposes to provide services to the Treasury Board for things like public accounts, for example, or the valuation of various other plans such as the judges' pensions plans as well as the plans for MPs.
That enough, Robert? We're over time, but I want to make sure you're clarified in that question.
It's okay.
Okay. The bells are ringing. There's a motion in the House. It's a 30-minute bell. We're probably down to 27 minutes, so we can go here till about 8 minutes left. We'll watch the time. If people are okay with that, Mr. Deltel.
Mr. Chair, Messieurs, Madame, soyez les bienvenus.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your House of Commons.
Question to you, because what I appreciate here is that everybody will recognize that we have a very high rank people among the civil servant, and especially for the Ministry of Finance. It is a huge target. It is not a target, but this is a huge issue for everybody. We're talking about billions of dollars. The last budget was $330 billion. We need strong people to address that, strong people to be sure that everything is going well, and we are very pleased to have that kind of people in our civil servants organization. Very interesting what you tabled a few minutes ago about the projection for this budget, but I would like to get back in last October when the Department of Finance published a report of the reality of the situation of the public finance. And in this report, and I've talked about it many times in the House of Commons and in an interview and everywhere I go, there was Q information, very important information on page 14. First of all, just to be sure that we're talking about the same reports, the report will have been tabled to the Minister of Finance on October the 10th, and this report on page 14 expressed a real concern on our side, and I hope from every people in Canada, about the future of the administration of this country. If nothing changes, we will have a zero deficit in 2055, and we will have to address a debt of $1.5 trillion in 2050. Those numbers came from a report made by the civil servant of the Finance Department, and we are very pleased to welcome you guys to our committee. So, first of all, I would like to know why do the Minister of Finance publish that kind of report?
Brad Rucker from the Fiscal Policy Division. We published that kind of report to test the fiscal sustainability, or to take a long-term view of the fiscal sustainability of the Canadian federal government. And the key, I think, conclusion of that report is that the fiscal plan, if left to certain assumptions over the long term, is fully sustainable.
Well, for sure, it's quite subjective when we talk about it can walk, it can run. For sure, if we do agree to have huge deficit and huge debt and without plan to zero deficit, maybe it's acceptable. But I can tell you that as a citizen, I do not accept that. And I'm very concerned with this reality. My other question will be, how do you get to this number? As you know, I asked many times the Minister of Finance in the House, and a few minutes ago here in this committee, when Canada will get back to zero deficit. And he never gave a clear answer. I asked for a date, he didn't answer. I asked for a horizon, long term, short term, medium term, I don't know what term, and no answer at all. So how you, civil servant, can evaluate that zero deficit will get back in 2055, and let me remind everybody here that it's 36 years later than the target established during the campaign by the actual government.
There's certain questions I know that is within your purview to answer, and there's certain questions within your purview as civil servants within the department that you can't. So I'll leave that prerogative up to you on this one, how you want to answer. Mr. Recker.
Well, I would just simply say that those are simply long-term projections based on, as you say, almost heroic assumptions with respect to assumptions regarding long-term spending, everything growing essentially at the rate of growth of the economy, and they're not projections of the current fiscal plan of the government. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Recker. Mr. Deltel.
Okay, maybe a more soft question. And I recognize that my question was based on a very political vision. I do recognize that, but it was just a technical question. How can you get those numbers? So I will get back to, without any political comment, but just for a technical question. How many times do you do that in a year? How many times do you, or is it an habitude or custom to produce that kind of evaluation every year, or do you produce it when the government asks you to do so?
It's an annual publication.
I'm sorry?
It's an annual publication.
Annual. Okay. Is it always at the same time in October?
It's typically in the fall, yeah.
Okay.
Time for one quick one.
Now, last technical question. As we all know, the Minister of Finance published it on December the 23rd, a few hours before Christmas. Is that the way to do so, a bit usually?
It's typically in the fall and after the fall update. We've only been publishing it for 3 years, I think.
Okay, thank you.
I was told, Gerard, that the official critic for the official opposition wanted some reading for Christmas Eve. Pierre, floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. First, and I know we're talking about legislative votes, but they are nevertheless in the main estimates. You said in your introduction that interest on debt, it was forecast to go down to $734 million because interest rates have come down based on the Library of Parliament document. That number for 2017-2018 would be over 14 billion. Our debt, or rather would be spent in this fiscal year, 14 to 15 billion dollars. And who will be the beneficiary of those sums? There are lending institutions in Canada. Will they receive interest? But who exactly will benefit from this $15 billion a year?
So if I think I understood your question the right way, you were asking who would be the recipients of these interest payments that are presented in the main estimate documents. So the interest on unmatured debt line item, which as you point out is approximating $15 billion, that's a reflection of interest that we will pay out on unmatured debt. So that would be Government of Canada bonds, Treasury bills, real return bonds, other market-based instruments. So the ultimate recipients of those interest payments would be holders of those instruments and holders of those securities.
Comme effectivement les détenteurs de titres.
So those holders will be the beneficiaries, but will financial institutions in Canada also benefit?
Shows disbursements related to unmatured debt. I would imagine that if financial institutions are holding some of those securities on their balance sheet, they would be a recipient of these interest payments as well.
Et peut-être me tourner maintenant sur une autre question.
Another topic, and thank you for that answer. Mr. Jovanovich, with regard to the review of the Tax Act, I mentioned this issue to the Minister of Finance, who had repeated in the past that he wants to review this act. Over the last year, we started looking at fiscal expenditures, which, as far as I've counted, led to 9 promises for changing the Tax Act. These were contained in the BIA, but when it comes to tax expenditures, are there any amounts in the main estimates that are related to a review of the Tax Act and which will help us simplify the Act, as the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister have repeated since they find the Tax Act is too complex? Perhaps to answer the question, I can come back to the review process for expenditures, which we began last year. We've started this internally within the Department of Finance. This is typically part of the daily work of the department. But what was interesting in the last year is that Budget 2016 clearly looked at all tax expenditures. We looked at all tax bases, corporate taxes, personal income taxes, and the sales tax. We also called on a group of experts, a panel, who shed new light on the issue, and this way we obtained an overall view of the situation. So at this point, this is part of the ongoing work of the department. It's part of our daily work. Another question on amounts, which were fairly surprising, at least for me. In now the main estimates for 2015-2016, 100 billion were spent, or rather 1 billion. And in the line items between 2016-2017, 28 million. So that amount came down. In 2017-2018, we're forecasting 89 million. Perhaps this question is for Mr. Mayor. What explains this decrease in the amounts voted today versus the previous years? And again, 2018, we're looking at an even lower number. So what explains this decrease over the years?
Maybe first I'll start with the estimates to date figure. So that's the $98 million compared to the request for 2017-18 main estimates of $89.2 million. The decline that you see there is a function of a number of different items. The first is in relation to items that I mentioned in my opening remarks. So there were two initiatives coming out of Budget 2015 totaling $1 million that were time-limited funding items that are falling off in 2017-18. Also, in the prior year, we had a funding program with respect to the Harbourfront Centre totaling $4 million. And since last year's estimates, that program has been transferred to the Department of Canadian Heritage. So that expenditure does not need to, nor should it, appear in our 2017-18 main estimates. We also had $1.5 million in government advertising. That was a component of total estimates to date of 2016, or in 2016-17. So combined, I'd say that those are the major factors leading to the decline year over year from estimates to date of $98 million last year to the opening figures for 2017-18.
Et juste pour confirmer, vous avez descendu les budgets de...
So you're saying the advertising budget has come down?
2017-18 do not include any amounts for advertising. That is not unusual. Those amounts, to the extent that they are decided on, typically come through later in the expenditure cycle, so supplementary estimates B or C. So that would be something that you might be looking at down the road.
Okay, thank you both. If we could if we can get away with one question from the government side and one from the official opposition so that we could let the officials go, and then we'll come back and vote on the finance estimates, Department of Finance main estimates, and deal with a couple of committee business items we had to deal with. So are we okay with that? If you're not, just say so, and we will hold officials here. Mr. Sabera, or if anybody else has a question on the side, go ahead.
The calculation for interest expense, and you have 2 points, a decrease of $528 million on other interest expense and $764 on interest on unmatured debt. Those are based on the assumptions in the fall 2016 economic statement.
That's right.
Obviously, we're not in fall 2000.
Right. So I think it's important maybe to understand kind of how this document gets put together and when vis-a-vis budget 2017 or the annual budget. So the main estimates are produced prior to the tabling of the annual budget, and we have to draw a line in the sand in terms of what projections and inputs that we're using. So given production deadlines on the mains, the last or the previous public fiscal projection at that time was the 2016 fall economic update. So subsequent adjustments to reflect assumptions that were made in budget 2017 will be seen in supplementary estimates B, for example, which is typically the first subs of the Department of Finance.
But not until November, according to the calendar?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll stop there. Thank you.
Mr. Albas.
The work our officials do for our country. Certainly appreciate that. Now, the minister came in earlier and talked about innovations and skills within the budget. Obviously, there may be some new initiatives that are not going to be in the estimates just because of the timing and whatnot. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the Institute for Fiscal Studies and Democracy put out a report about a month ago, just in regards to the money that goes out the door, about $23 billion for innovation and skills. Does that come under this pocket of money that is under the main estimates here? Or is that through a different budget?
So I think in general terms what you see in the Department of Finance's estimates are the main federal provincial transfer payments and the interest expenses on unmatured debt. Those are kind of the high profile items that you see in our estimates. So any expenditures with respect to the areas that you're speaking of would likely appear in other departments that are charged with implementing those programs.
So even the EI funds for retraining and whatnot would come under a different pocket of money?
That would, yeah.
Okay. So obviously the largest increases here that it shows on the back end of the estimates here has to do with the health transfer, social transfer and whatnot. So again, the Canada Health Transfer, this is based on long-standing agreements that we've had that were renegotiated, I believe. So that the new bilaterals or whatever you would like to say, the new approach by this government is not accounted for in these money in the main estimates at this time.
That's correct. So it's formulaic. The Canada Health Transfer, as you say, is formulaic, as well as the Canada Social Transfer. Based on I think you're referring to the health agreements that have been made with the provinces. Those amounts are not reflected in the main estimates.
Okay, so do we have an idea of when we will expect those to come in with subs A or subs Bs at some point?
Usually so.
I think it would be a function first of when the necessary legislation and authorities come into place, but typically any adjustments after those authorities are in place would be supplementary estimates B or possibly C. So,
okay, so we probably won't see some of these new health accords that have been and the transfers associated with them until much further into the fiscal year.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. I think that's it for my questions, Mr. Chair. Oh, just one quick one on FinTrack. How much time and energy does the Department of Finance spend supervising FinTrack and just watching how it works? Who's the representative for FinTrack on these estimates?
No, I believe. Go ahead. Did you hear the question, or do you want to? Could you ask it again, Dan?
No, I didn't really. I just asked to see if we had someone here for it. Obviously, we've conducted a housing study, and I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but there was a case where many different groups, OSFI, Minister of Finance, I believe, even was the Bank of Canada here. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
When we were talking, CMHC definitely, CMHC I believe it was. when we would talk about cash payments, purchases for homes and whatnot, and sharing of data, there seemed to be absolutely no one in the room that had any understanding of what FINTRAC does. And now, is that information sharing part of FINTRAC's mandate? Currently, does the estimates that you have here help to supply that data sharing, because there does seem to be some gaps in interagency sharing of information when it comes to our housing markets?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify your question. Are you asking like the collaboration that we have with finance in terms of like the information sharing?
Yes, because all the other agencies seem to have no understanding of what information FINTRAC collects, let's say through a real estate agent versus on cash sales, et cetera.
Yeah, obviously under our Act, there are specificity around the kind of information that we can actually obtain from the different reporting entities. Like we deal with 31,000 entities, and it's transaction, as you know, that are beyond 10,000 in terms of value. So we get millions of transactions like this year over year, and we also get information from those entities when it comes to suspicious transaction and things like that. We do have collaboration with finance.
No, I totally understand the suspicious issues, and I'm happy to see that those are being looked at. What I'm talking about, that there's a lot of data that many of the policy decision making that is done in the area of housing, none of them seem to mention FINTRAC's role in collecting some of that data. Are there restrictions on that data that do not allow you to pass it on to groups like CMHC so that they can have a better snapshot on some of our housing markets?
We have specificity around who we can disclose with, and what I can tell you is we don't disclose to CMHC. Only to the region partners are part of our Act, that are identified in our Act, like the RCMP is an example, CSIS is another example. If you want further details, I'd be pleased to get back with further information on that answer.
Sure, I would appreciate that. There's also some concerns just about the implementation of credit unions and whatnot, but maybe we'll save that for another day. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we will have to suspend, and we will come back to vote on the main estimates of the Department of Finance and to deal with some committee business. I thank officials. There may be a possibility we will reserve the right if we have to call somebody because a specific question comes up, but as far as this hearing, you're released for today. Thank you very much. Meeting suspended. We'll lift the. We're back to order, and just Ron, on your. I just wanted on your question on grain tickets. On page 210 in the budget document, this is what it says. The income tax rules provide a deferral in respect to deferred cash purchase tickets issued for deliveries of certain listed grains. Given changes in the grain marketing regime in Canada, the government is conducting a public consultation regarding the ongoing utility of this income tax deferral. And so it's consultations, and I'll just tell you my blue review quite bluntly. It's a current practice that allows farmers to defer income based on a marketing situation that may cost them to receive 2 or 3 years' sales of crop in one given year due to marketing conditions that they have no control over. And regardless of whether the regime for marketing has changed or not, that issue still exists. So you know where I stand on the issue. They can do their consultations, but I'm strongly opposed to changing that policy.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. The information that I saw was that it had been changed versus consultation, so I'm pleased with that. Thank you.
Okay, then on the estimates, we have 4 or 5 votes to make. I think you have the estimate paper before you.
We're opposed on division.
Shall vote 1 under the Department of Finance, less the amount granted in interim supply carry. The amount is $66,960,447.75. Shall it carry?
Division.
On division. Shall vote 5 under the Department of Finance, less the amount granted in interim supply carry in the amount of 75 cents. On division? Carried on division. Shall vote 1 under Financial Transactions and Reports and Analysis Centre of Canada, less the amount granted in interim supply carry in the amount of $34,457,116.50. Carry on division. Carried on division. Shall vote 1 under the office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, less the amount granted in interim supply carry in the amount of $780,793.50. On division. Carried. Shall a report vote 1 and vote 5 under the Department of Finance, vote 1 under Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada, and vote 1 under the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions to the House. Carried on division. Carried. And we won't, just to inform people, we won't report that until we hear from the Canada Revenue Agency as well, and we'll do the two together. We're really on division today. Okay, we have a number of motions that we need to deal with, and I expect people want to deal with them in public. We can deal with them in camera, but we probably should give the clerk so that on the 2-week break they can, with the library, work on the estimates for what it would cost to do our pre-budget hearings this fall and travel to the committee and so on. So we need to do that in camera. So could we go into camera first, deal with that, and then go public? Okay.
Feels like I'm back in government.
We're agreed in going in camera? And we need one. We're in public. We'll reconvene. Do you want to lift your motion, Pierre, and see if we can finish it in this session before we go to votes, and we'll adjourn until Wednesday.
J'ai déposé une motion et quelques...
I tabled a motion at the end of March with regard to the Minister of National Revenue, who gave an answer to the committee following the report on tax evasion, and certain promises for action had been given before March 31st. My motion is quite simple, actually. It's simply asking the minister to testify on any progress made on the promises to take measures, which she gave to us in answer to our question. I'm not going to read the motion, but again, it's just to invite the minister to speak to the 4 or 5 points on which she had promised to take action by March 31st. It's April 10 today, so I think it would be right for the committee to ask questions of the minister, to hear from her what progress has been made, and to see whether she actually kept her promise. So it's quite clear. And I mentioned 2 hours with the minister.
Those questions be asked when she's here in estimates. She hasn't been here in estimates yet, has she?
No.
You think about that?
C'est un bon point que je voulais faire, peut-être.
Actually, that's a good point. Maybe we can combine her appearance with the main estimates, if committee members would agree to that. An hour on any progress made, as indicated in her response.
Estimates anyway. Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And looking at Mr. Dussault's motion, merci. If I could go through, I'd like to propose an amendment on your motion. Chair, can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. What section of the motion?
It will be the last, actually the last paragraph, the last sentence of his motion.
Okay, read it.
That the new sentence be that the committee invite the Minister of National Revenue to report in writing on the progress made on her commitments in response to recommendations 1, 3, 8, 9, and 14 set out in the sixth report of the committee, and deleting the remainder of that sentence.
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask for direction on this. Is that motion? Does it change the intent? What's the clerk's ruling, Mr. Dussault?
I don't think it's useful because I could have read order paper questions if I wanted the written answer.
Yeah, that may be your view on his amendment, but I'm wondering, is it is a legitimate amendment, Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just argue that it would substantially change the nature of it. It seemed to me that Mr. Sote's original premise was to bring accountability and to have updates to members of Parliament, versus in a written format where it is less organic and where good questions can be put.
Do you have any judgment on this? Hmm? The motion is in order. Yeah, the amendment. So you've moved an amendment, and you've heard my point in estimates as well. It can still be asked, I guess. Okay, on the amendment. Dan, you made a point in the amendment. You think it having the minister here to raise questions. Pierre.
repeat my point that that's changed substantially the motion itself, because if I wanted a written answer, I would have write an order paper question instead of a motion in front of this committee. So I don't agree with that amendment. Because if I wanted her to answer by a written answer, I would write to her, write a letter to her and ask for an answer. So it doesn't need the support of this committee to write letters to ministers. I can write it on my own and wait for the answers. So I want the minister to come to be accountable for the deadline she accepted in her answer to our report. So we can make sure she's doing what she promised to do to us, parliamentarians, members of the committee. So I don't accept that amendment.
Dan, you had another point you want to raise?
No, I'm happy with the debate.
Anybody over here? On the amendment? Question on the amendment? All those in favor? Do you want recorded? Recorded vote. All those, go ahead, Madam Clerk. On the amendment.
The question is on the amendment of Mr. Sorbera. Mr. Fergus. Mr. Sorbera.
We in favor?
We have 3 minutes now to go.
No, we've got.
Ms. O'Connell.
Yeah.
Mr. Poisson. Mr. Ouellet. Madame Boucher.
We get 6.
Mr. Albus, Mr. Leipert, Mr. Dussault. It's carried.
Carried. On the motion as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Then we will request that, and as I said, she will be before us on estimates. So nobody wants to come back to deal with the other motions tonight, I don't think. So meeting adjourned. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.